Rabbanim. Thank you, everyone. Yanis, thank you so much for allowing us to have these, these amazing achievements, held in the shul and the yeshiva. And thank you all for coming. So, the Seder Rosh Hashanah, we start off by discussing, all the types of. There are four different Rosh Hashanahs. Usually when we think of Rosh Hashanah, we think of the general Rosh Hashanah that we're used to celebrating. Yom Adin, Shofar, etc. But really, there are four Rosh Hashanahs that are discussed, within the Masechet. So aside from that one, which is obviously in the beginning of Tishrei, we also have on Pesach, which is the Rosh Hashanah of the wheat. We have Shavuot, which is the Rosh Hashanah of the fruit for the year, and then we have Sukkot, which is Rosh Hashanah of the water. So a lot of the Masechet, we deal with Kiddush HaChodesh, sanctifying the moon. And only in the second half of the Gemara do we really come towards, the Rosh Hashanah that we're really accustomed to thinking about and being a part of. So, there are a few points that I just wanted to discuss briefly. So first it says on Daf Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, I'll just read it all in English. It says, Rabbi Yochanan said, anyone that studies Torah but doesn't teach it to others is like a myrtle in the wilderness. A myrtle like das, exactly like the sim. Why? Because the myrtle has a very pleasant fragrance, but it's in the middle of the wilderness. Nobody could smell it. So it's like I learned this Torah that I could have, passed on to someone else, and maybe could have changed some lives, maybe impacted an entire lineage or family tree. But the fact that I didn't, no one was able to really experience what I learned because I didn't share it. I didn't decide to give this to the world. But now, the Acherim, they say it differently. They say anyone that studies Torah and teaches it to others in a place where there is no Torah scholars, it's like a myrtle in the wilderness, but for a different reason. It's because it's very precious and enjoyed by those who find it, who basically, that get the ability to hear it. So it's like if you're going to a place, that doesn't really have, a lot of Torah going on, a lot of, matters of Kedusha, when someone finally hears it, it's very it's enjoyable. It's like if you ever took a vacation and there aren't a lot of Jews, and finally you see like that one Jewish guy, like standing out with its tzitzit, you're like, wow, like it feels good. You finally see another Jew, and that's basically the concept that we're discussing here. So then it also says in Chav Tet Amud Aleph, it says in the Mishnah, when basically to sum up the Mishnah, it says when Moshe held up his hands, the Jews prevailed. But then if Moshe put his hands down, then like Amalek prevailed. So the question is, do we really think that the hands of Moshe held up the entire world, literally physically holding his hands up? It sounds a little childish. So really the whole idea is that, what's the whole thing? When Moshe's holding his hands up, we're looking up. We're looking up to Hashem. That means that we're putting our faith in the hands of Hashem. But when Moshe's hands are down, it's the complete opposite. So there's a story I heard. This is a very nice story. At least I thought so. It says, and this happened in Israel. There is a very big businessman, and he was, and even though he was very wealthy, I guess maybe he got depressed. And actually, I heard this from Rav Stefanski. I don't want to take credit for the story. In case this gets out somehow. So pretty much what happened, so this very big businessman, he got depressed and he wanted to commit suicide. So what did he do? He went to the Azrieli Towers, it's one of the tallest buildings in Tel Aviv in Israel, and he went all the way up to the roof, and he was about to jump, and then the door closed behind him. And then he decided to change his mind. He said, maybe life is worth living for. But now he has a problem. The door behind him just locked, and he's on like a massive building. Like, what's he supposed to do? No one knows he's up there. So he's like, all right, wait, I have a wad of cash in my pocket. So he starts throwing it out. Maybe someone's going to see all the money falling down, and they're going to see him up there, and then he's going to be able to be rescued. So he starts throwing money, more and more. It's literally raining money. And he sees everyone gets on the floor, and he's in Israel. Everyone's going crazy. Everyone's picking up the money, going crazy. But he sees no one's looking up. So and then he runs out of money. He's like, what am I supposed to do now? Like this is awkward. So he sees some pebbles on the top of the building. So he decides, what do I have to lose at this point? So he throws a couple of pebbles and he nails the guy in the head. And then the guy looks up, and finally, he sees the guy on top of the building. He's going crazy. And then he gets someone to open the building. He goes inside, and he saves the guy. But what's the entire lesson? It's the fact that only when we got hurt, finally it took a stone hitting us in the face to look up to Hashem. And that's the whole idea. It's like when things are going well, I'm grabbing the money left and right. I don't look up for a second. I'm having such a good time. But, finally, when something hurts a little, that's when we finally decide, let me see what's going on upstairs. So then it says a little further, actually back because I went out of order. It says in the Mishnah that Rabbi Gamliel had formed, basically, back then they had to, when it came to Rosh Chodesh, if someone saw the moon, they had to go up to the mountain, they had to light a fire, which would lead to another guy lighting a fire, and so on and so forth, until they finally got back maybe to Yerushalayim, wherever it had to go, and that they'd be able to declare when was Rosh Chodesh. So Rabbi Gamliel, and also just a side note, so some people at the time, they weren't necessarily holding of the rabbi's ideas, and maybe had difference of opinion, so they try and confuse the entire system. So they'd light fires when there really wasn't Rosh Chodesh to confuse everyone. So what happened? So Rabbi Gamliel, he was obviously very smart, and he knew how to figure out whether or not someone was lying or if they're telling the truth. So he basically made a mock-up of moons and held, and put them in his attic. And when someone said, I saw the moon, he said, did it look like this one or this one or this one? And then some of them didn't even exist that Rabbi Gamliel created, so he was able to tell that they were lying, because you have to be knowledgeable to understand, that look, it faced this direction at this time, and so on and so forth. But that's not what the whole thing that I'm about to tell you is. There's a big question in the Gemara. How did Rabbi Gamliel create images of moons? Isn't that Avodah Zarah? You can't create idols. You can't create all these things. So it came down a little later. We came and said Rav Huna bereid Rav Idi. So he said, I heard from Abaye, you can't make an image though of a human face. Maybe that was okay. But because it says lo tasuniti, you shall not make with or you shall not make it, don't make lo tasuniti, don't make it like me. Or you could read it as oto, you shall not make me. Since man created the image of God, it's a sword to form the image of a human. That was the reason. It said, you can't make a picture of a face because that a face resembles me. I'm Hashem. You can't recreate me. But so I had a little chiddush on this. I was just thinking about it. The same way that you can't make the image of God, it's asur because you're recreating God, right? But at the same time, that means that wherever you look at another Jew, you can see God in him. Do you hear what I'm saying? Yeah. So I just thought that was very cool. It's like a lot of times when we're having, if we're very mad at someone, or this guy, pissed you off, or this guy did this or that, we should try and say, in the same way that something became usher because Hashem said there's a little piece of me in him, we should try to find that piece of Hashem in him, even when the circumstances aren't ideal. Yeah, so then, I'm sorry, almost there. So then Rav Chasda said, a little later, it says in Chavav Amar Aleph, Rav Chasda said, why does the Kohen Gadol not enter the Kodesh HaKodashim with his gold garments to perform the service? Again, it says basically because the prosecutor can't become an advocate. So, ask the Gemara, and that's why I can't go into gold, because it brings up the Egel Zahav. There's a question, but he goes in and he does the service with the cow. Why can he use the cow but not the gold? So basically, the answer is because the cow changed form. You're using the blood, and not using the actual cow. So I thought about this also, and it said that's a very similar concept to exactly what tshuva is. When you come in, you didn't change physically as a person, but the fact that you changed forms. You went from someone that does avirot to someone that now says I don't want to do avirot. And you could have maybe turned your avirot into mitzvot according to some opinions. So now, lastly, this time. There's just one quick story I heard about this week's parsha. I thought it ties in very nicely. So pretty much one time, a long time ago, there's a yeshiva, and there's still a yeshiva, but there's also that. So, and there was one guy that was always learning in the corner by himself, only by himself. So anyone would come over to him, he didn't want to speak to them. Nothing, absolutely nothing. So eventually, years passed, and eventually he passed away. And they see that it was written in his will, bury my notes that I did all these years, bury them with me. So everyone was obviously very baffled, like, what do you mean bury them with you? Like maybe there's like amazing stuff in there. So they went to Rabbi Yeshua Leib Midiskin at the time, and he was known to be obviously a very big gadol, and he had this ability. Basically, he was able to look at the cover of a sefer and know like what's inside. So the Talmidim went to Rabbi Yeshua Leib, and they gave him all the notes. So they said, Rabbi, like, what do we do? Should we make copies? Not make copies? Like, we don't know what to do. Because now his wish was to bury it with him. And so Rabbi Yeshua Leib said, okay, he opened it for a second, and it came to yesterday's parsha, Vayetze, yeah. So it came to Vayetze, and there was a question. The question asked was, why, like the whole thing with Yaakov and he's sleeping in the rocks, in the dream. So the question is pretty much, why did the Malachim need a ladder to go up to Shemayim? They're Malachim. They don't need stairs. Like what's the deal? So that was pretty much the question. So the guy wrote an answer. Oh, that means probably because they were baby Malachim. They didn't have wings yet. And Rabbi Yeshua Leib said, like that's a stupid answer. So you could bury the notes with him. And what's the whole lesson? The whole lesson is that because he never wanted to learn with anyone else, that's why he came up with these, foolish answers. And it just shows the power of having a chavruta and learning, in a shir and learning with other people and hearing other ideas. And that's where the power you get out of, that's what we're supposed to do as Jews. We're supposed to learn from each other and enhance our ideas and just really move forward. And that's it.